Today, let's jump right in here with cove cutting. The coves that we cut for these for the shadow box are what some of you on the forum have called crown moldings. Actually, this is not a crown molding. This is half of a crown molding. A crown molding consists of a cove and a bead. In other words, an S-curve. And this would be part of that crown molding, but by no means not all of it. Nonetheless, it's a very, very attractive molding, used quite a bit on the tops of cabinets as well as the shadow box that you saw me with over there on the workbench. The coves are not cut with the aid of a router, shaper, molder, or any other tool that you would think are there to create these shapes. Instead, this was cut with nothing more than a standard combination saw blade. The wood was actually passed across the blade at an angle so that the blade sort of leaned it out, scooped it out, and created that cove. I'm going to show you right now how to do that. First of all, you need a couple of jigs, and in particular, to start off with, we need what is called parallel rules. These are parallel rules. Used to be a ubiquitous thing in any drafting store. You could walk in and buy these. Now it's hard to find a drafting store, let alone a parallel rule. So if you look at the blackboard, you'll see that I have put the plans for this parallel rule right there. For the purposes of discussion, we will consider the rules, these long pieces, okay? These are 18 inches long in the plans, and the short pieces we won't even consider at all. Now, when you're making a cove, you have to first decide how deep you want to make that cove, okay? And how wide. On this piece of wood, now I've already put the bevels on the edge. Normally I do the bevels after we actually cut the cove, but here I've decided to do them first so that we have a finished product when we're done. The cove cannot be any deeper than, of course, the thickness of the board. This is 3/4 of an inch thick. I can't go any deeper than that. In fact, I don't want to go as deep as that because that would make this way too flimsy. I'm going to keep my cove to 1/2 inch deep and no deeper. The next thing that I want to do is I want to find out the width of the cove. I want that cove to go from this 40-degree corner to that 45-degree corner. I want it to fill the space in between the two of those. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that's a space of 2 3/4 inches, and it is. So I'm going to adjust my parallel rules so that they are 2 3/4 inches apart. There we go. Let me check that. Looks good. Okay. Parallel rules are now adjusted for the width of the cove that we're going to cut. Now let's adjust the table saw for the depth of cut, which is no more than 1/2 inch. So let's, I'm going to need my glasses for this one. There we go. Okay, that is way too deep. Let me bring that up. Okay, these are not critical measurements. They are approximate. There is a 1/2 inch cove right there. Now, that is the deepest we can cut, and I have got a adjustable stop collar mounted on the table post that's closest to me. This is what it looks like. It is actually a big nut. It has the collar and the nut portion are threaded at a 16 pitch. meaning that there's one thread every 1/16 of an inch. So one complete revolution of this collar is going to expand it or collapse it by 1/16 of an inch. Now what I'm going to do is on the collar that I have mounted to this table, I am going to collapse it completely, okay? And then I'm going to, okay, there it is, collapsed completely. Now I'm going to lower it until the lower surface, that is this surface on the collar, contacts the carriage. At this point, I cannot possibly get my table any lower than what you see here. So no more than 1/2 inch of the blade will ever stick up above the table. All right, we're almost ready to find the next part of this equation, which is what angle do I use to pass the wood over the blade. Well, if I take my parallel rule and I put it on here, now I'm going to turn the blade slightly. Okay, you can see the blade is catching the rule and pulling it backwards. I don't want it to do that. I want it to just brush the sides. And right there. There we go. Okay. Now, the teeth of the blade are hitting the rule that is closest to you, farthest away from me. I'm going to see if I can move that just a hair more and get them to hit. Take a little bit of, come on. Sooner or later, there we go. Okay. Now, it's just barely brushing both rules. As the tooth of the saw blade comes up, it just brushes the inside surface of the far rule, the one that's closest to you, and as it comes back down and disappears under the table, it brushes the corner of the near rule. That tells me what angle I need to pass this wood over the saw blade. I'm going to mark that with a pencil. And that will give me the angle that I need to use. Now, I'm going to, I've got so many pencil lines on this already, I'm going to have to scribble out a few that don't apply. There we go. Now, before I did this, I probably should have used Drew's trick and taken a little alcohol and rubbed out the pencil lines that I don't want. You can draw very nicely with a pencil on aluminum. It's one of the advantages. It will come off with alcohol, like I said, or it will come off with wax. Now, this is the fence that we are going to use to guide the wood as we cut the cove. It is nothing more than a long piece of plywood, and I have glued a scrap of oak to create an L-beam. One piece holds the other piece straight and square. Now I am going to line that up with the lines I just drew, but in order to do that, remember this piece of wood, we want to cut the coves between those two corners. We're going to be guiding this with the edge, that edge against the board. Okay, so how far is that edge from where the cove should begin? I take my square here and measure that and find that it is exactly 1/4 of an inch. So I will measure from the near line, the line closest to where the blade disappears under the table. I'll measure a 1/4 of an inch back from that. Now, put away all my arsenal here. Okay. The next thing I'm going to have to do in order to position this fence is I've got to raise the table, and I'm going to raise it to where the fence just goes flat on the table, about right there. Okay. And then bring this back, line it up with the 2 marks that I made. And see, there we are. I will clamp the back part first. I'm just going to snug this up and leave this so that I can shift this around a little bit. This, by the way, this may not be the final position of the cove cutting fence. You'll find that as you do this, sometimes you have to adjust the position after the first couple of cuts. This is an important part of this fence. This is a little block that is cut so that it fits right between the ledge where the where the fence attaches, and this straight edge that I'm using right here, so that when I clamp this down, it doesn't bend the fence. That little block is handy to keep around. You might want to paint that red or something so that you don't accidentally throw it away if you make one of these. Okay, that's it. It's the fence is locked down and ready for us to make our first initial pass here. I'm going to mark the side that I want to cut with some X's, because in between now and the time that I turn this on, I'm liable to get it wrong. It's happened before, folks. Now, I'm going to, right now, if I turn this, you'll see that the blade is barely brushing the wood. I'm going to make one cut with it like that. I'm going to take, though, this stop nut and expand it until the base hits the table carriage. You know, I'll show you what I'm doing here with the here we go. What I've done is I've taken it and I've expanded it exactly 1/2 inch, okay, until this surface is in contact with the carriage of the table, the lower surface. That now I'm going to use that stop nut in order to control my depth of cut on each pass. You get a push stick, and we'll turn this sucker on. The score marks should have been right down the center, and as you can see, they are way out. I need to move them quite a bit here in order to bring them back into position. So I'm going to see how far out they are. Okay, let's see, what do we say, 2 3/4, so it's 1 3/8. It looks like we're out by about at least 3/16 of an inch. This may have had to do with some of the confusion that I had with all the which line was which. And let me after you do so many of these sessions, you accumulate so many of these lines. There we go. Yes, it was a confusion with the line. That's where it should have been, right there. We'll try another cut with it in this position. I'm going to raise this 1/16 of an inch. And drop the table down. There we go. Okay, that's much better. I'm right in the. I'm much closer to the middle now. And if I measure where the Cove is cutting, I'm 3/4 away from the corner on that side, and 11/16 away from it on this side. So at the most, I need to come back towards me about 1/32 of an inch. I'm just going to barely nudge these back a little bit. There and there to keep my angle. This is not a necessarily a precision operation, guys, but it hardly ever is. Okay, once again, I'll raise this 1/16 of an inch, turning this at one revolution around. Dropping the table down. Let's make another pass and see where we are. Perfect. Okay. Now, from this point out, I am going to be lowering the table by 1/16 of an inch, making a pass, and then doing it all over again and again until the second to the last pass, and then I'll stop and we'll discuss what we're going to do next. Sometimes happens around here. We have a let me shut the dust sucker off and the Shopsmith. Okay. Yeah. If you lose your electricity, make sure that you turn both of your machines off. All of the machines that you've been running before you go back in there and mess with the fuses. This web studio right here is in the middle of an old showroom, and we don't necessarily have all the electricity we'd like. The salesmen would demonstrate just one machine at a time. So I'm going to do this without the benefit of dust collection, but let me finish up here. Okay, I am 1/16 of an inch away from where I want to be with this Cove molding. Now I am going to split the next pass. Instead of making one pass at 1/16, I'm going to make it into 1/32 of an inch. Now the reason for that is that it will make a much smoother cut if I only remove 1/32 of an inch of stock rather than 1/16 of an inch. You'll also notice that on the last passes, I will be going much, much slower to get more cuts per inch, therefore a smoother cut. On the very, very last cut, I'm going to make a pass across it, and then I'm going to turn the board end for end and make another pass. Now, this is a symmetrical molding. That means if we split this down the center, it's the same on both sides. By making one pass and then turning around and making another pass in two opposite directions, I remove any difference between one side or the other. I make the Cove slightly elliptical, okay, but ever so slightly elliptical. You'll never see it. And I'm going to prove it to you here. Let me, first of all, raise this by 1/16 of an inch, or no, 1/32 of an inch. Make my second to the last pass here. And then two cuts at a 1/32 of an inch. Dust sucker. And it makes a big difference, believe me. I'm sitting here having all sorts of dust that's creeping in under my glasses and getting in my nose and my eyes and what have you. But there you go, folks. It's done. As you can see, it's a nice piece of woodworking. I wish you could feel this. It's relatively smooth, too. It won't take too much sanding to get all those little scores out of there. Although it'll take some, and Jewel will tell you how to do that a little later on in this webcast. That's how to make the Cove molding. Now I'm going to show you one more operation.